Watashi no namae wa Candice Kumai desu. My mother is originally from southern Japan in a small island called Kyushu, and my father is Polish-American who was originally from Poland on a farm, and he came over to the U.S. with his family when he was 11 on a boat, and they landed in Connecticut. So I am a byproduct of a Polish-American and Japanese family. Two different worlds merged into one. So Buddhist mother, Christian father, and the traditions and the lifestyle that we lived were not conventional at all where I grew up in North County, San Diego. So growing up, it was actually quite difficult to understand that my identity was a lot different than most of the kids that I grew up with. But the beauty in it is, after getting older, I could look back at my childhood and say, you know, I learned so much about where I came from early on, and I'm really proud to have that connection to my heritage. When we were little, my mother used to teach Japanese at the Buddhist temple nearby, and she still actually does, because she's such a boss. And we used to do the Obon or the Hanamatsuri, which is the flower festival, or the Obon or the Hatsubon when we celebrate somebody passing. We bring our ancestors back from the temple and we bring their spirits back into our home, and we welcome them and we spend time with them and we give them offerings at the Butsudan, which is a mini little shrine that you build for your ancestors. And the Hanamatsuri is the flower festival. And as a young girl, my mom used to put us in kimonos, and we would do traditional dancing and singing. We would, you know, make traditional Japanese recipes. And for me, it was so unique because nobody around me really celebrated that. But for us, it was really very special. Most people should know that having a Japanese mom means that you will always have to live up to a golden standard. And it means that you cannot disappoint. So since I was a rebel when I was growing up, I was never Japanese enough for the Japanese family, and I was never American enough or Polish enough for my Polish family. And that was, you know, a mind f***. So as a kid, you never really thought that you were part of one or the other. You were just the mixed kid. With a Japanese mom, you were expected to do great things. Nothing was ever good enough. She has high expectations and a high level of standards that she expected from my sister and I. And because my sister was so studious, so good, and to me, she was perfect, I had to be the polar opposite. So for my mother, this was very shocking, and to my father as well. And I know, in fact, it's just very American. You know, I said, well, I'm not one or the other. I'm American, and I'm going to do whatever the fuck I want to do. And that rebellion is what really got me into cooking, too. It was like my mother told me, you cannot and will not make a living cooking. And I said, oh, yeah? Watch me. What's more important than even are we finding our voice is, are people listening? And I think being Asian, you're raised to be poised, quiet, graceful. And my mother had always said, do not give anyone trouble. You stay to yourself and you keep to yourself. So it was stand up for yourself, know who you are, know your worth, have respect for yourself, but remember to never be of trouble to anyone else. So this moment in time, I always say to my audience, and my Asian girlfriends and minority girlfriends have all come together to speak out and say, please hear us out, and please educate yourself on the history of Asians in the US, because there is a deep-rooted history where Asians made America what it is today. We have a story to tell. We have just never been heard. And so instead, what's been happening is when vulnerable people and elderly people were being attacked, that was a trigger where we could say, now we step in, because this is completely and utterly inappropriate. When you go visit another culture and you imbue yourself, which is what my work does, is it takes people to a different place, even if you can't be there. And I felt lucky enough to grow up with Polish and Japanese grandparents that survived the war. And coming from these two war-torn countries, it made us care so deeply to never forget where we came from. Even if somebody teases me for being Japanese, which has happened my whole life. When we go through these hard times, the one thing is we can educate and we can talk all we want, but we do want people to do actionable practices that make the change. So one easy little change you can make is start supporting small businesses and Asian-owned businesses, and learn about where people come from, because you'd be really surprised to know that someone that you think might be from X is actually from Y, and they have a beautiful story to tell. When I started writing books, that's when the self-expression was allowed to a certain degree. I mean, everyone's got an editor. That's what we always say in the industry. And I wrote, on the masthead or had columns at several large magazines in New York. But we never thought that it would take 15 years to get here. And here we are. After people started to pay attention, they started booking me to do modeling all over again. But this time it was like spokesperson modeling, where you're almost put on a pedestal to share the stories of different American iconic legacy brands. So it did take a long time for these legacy brands to say, American means mixed. American means Candice K. Like, you can look different than everyone else, and you can let her be herself, and she'll still help us to sell and elevate our brand. And so that's where the magic sort of happened. And the clean eating did so well. My career exploded when all of these books like Clean Green Drinks and Clean Green Eats did phenomenally well. And then the full circle pivot happened, where I said, okay, all of you want to write health and wellness cookbooks? Okay, I don't want to be in on this anymore. I'm going to go left while you all go right. And I'm going to write Kintsugi Wellness, which was a terrifying book to write, because if you have a Japanese mom, you must elevate your work to a golden standard. So the sad part was if you compared the sales on the two books, which is what every marketing, advertising, and publisher is going to do, they were like, Candice has dropped off in sales. It was not a lack of interest or a loss of interest. It was the fact that writing about my Japanese heritage was not basic. It wasn't normal. It wasn't American enough. And I think now we're at a point in time where that's actually changing. The challenging part of being in this career in media and publishing publicly is that I was always defined as only one way. Maybe Candice can only do Asian. Maybe she's only going to be the golden girl of wellness forever. And what does that really mean? For me, it was hard because people expected me to do X, Y, Z. And inside, I was always dying to just write shows, write books, develop, different production behind a bigger picture. And so I always did things with intention, grace, respect, culture, heritage, and trust. Like, if my audience can't trust me, why would I even write a cookbook? Because I want to make sure that every recipe is done so well that you at home are not going to have any problems. They're foolproof. So when I started writing for bigger outlets about culture and travel, I realized that my heritage actually had everything to do with why I could be an easy, opinion-related voice in publishing. When my entire career, I felt that I couldn't do that because people made me feel like I was stupid and that I was only here because of how I looked and because I got lucky or I had a good publicist. That is dog shit. Sorry for my horrible language, but it's true. Like, That's the most insulting thing a girl that is self-made 100% could ever hear is, oh, you just have a good agent, don't you? So haku is defying definition, the same exact way that I have with my own career. I never, ever thought that it would take this long to focus on details, integrity, intention, and have people notice 15 years later. I thought it would be so obvious that I did everything with excellence, and it wasn't, because the space that I was in was so crowded and people were more concerned about clickbait and who was getting more likes and who had more followers, when all I did was care about the smallest little detail that meant so much to me. There is a quote by Saul Bass, "I want to create beautiful things even if nobody cares." And I have lived by that quote for my entire career. And I almost cannot believe that it took so long for anybody to notice. But when you are a minority and when you are a marginalized voice, you are not seen or heard the same. So I had to defy definition in my own way. And that is how the world has started to receive my gifts and vice versa. When everybody was starting to receive the documentaries and the books, the greatest pleasure in life was saying, wow, I can't believe they get me, even though I come from different parts of the world. And with haku, it's very much the same thing. You take Japanese white rice and you make it into something unexpectedly beautiful, which is vodka. And being half Polish, I know vodka. Haku will also be donating to Asian American Pacific Islander small businesses. And if you want to help too, all you have to do is text haku to 20222.
Make it Suntory time.